Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Esteem a New Woman. The devilish diva starts on the road to becoming a new creature in Christ in this all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem a New Woman at Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. A UC Berkeley math professor says she has to teach fractions to calculus students because standards in American classrooms have fallen so far. Starting to see why all my book sales have been dropping for the last 2 years. Seems like dumb is the new American way. Critical question: how can we make America great again if we don't have students who have a great mastery of material? Now, according to reports, Professor Zesvalina Stankova of UC Berkeley says that many of the students who come into her calculus class are 5 to 8 years behind. And with these students being 5 to 8 years behind in mathematics, the professor has to go and stop teaching calculus to start teaching them fractions and other math skills that they were supposed to have learned in junior high school and high school. Now, the officials at UC Berkeley are believing that the problem with students struggling with subjects like calculus and coming in 5 to 8 years behind has to do with the ending of standardized testing in 2020. And in 2020, then UC Berkeley President Janet Napolitano decided to end standardized testing as a requirement for people being able to enter into UC Berkeley, and without the SAT and ACT tests to be a barometer for seeing who's qualified to be able to go to UC Berkeley. This is the reason why the school has students struggling with math, such as fractions and other material they were supposed to have mastered in junior high school. And as a result of her looking to end this standard, what's happened is that you have students coming into the school who are not prepared to be able to do the material. And that's the issue that Professor Stankova has as related to this whole situation, with her having to pause her office hours to teach fractions and other material children were supposed to master. And it really shows how the entire public school system has gone into a really worse decline than it was in the 1980s, when I was in the school system trying to go out here and get my high school diploma. Now, I remember back in the 1980s when I was in school, basically seeing a whole system where we saw lots of students basically struggling as related to being able to do basic things like fractions. And I also saw the real start of the problems with a lot of these students really starting in the middle schools, like the one I attended, IS 148, which was more of a cage than a middle school. That's where I saw where the real problems start as related to kids struggling with math and science, because when we had those type of classes there, because these school institutions had no sort of structure or order, what happened was, as these children created chaos, it wasn't a productive environment where children were able to learn. And that's the real problem with America's education system, where we start to see these children break down. Basically, many kids, they'll be all right in elementary schools, and what happens is, as they enter into the junior high schools or the middle schools, all of the issues that they had from elementary school start to become exacerbated as related to the whole social promotion that many kids go through, because under the law of No Child Left Behind, many teachers these days, what they do is go out here and fudge the grades, even though the children have not mastered the material, because they will be directly held accountable for the student's performance, and because they're directly held accountable for the student's performance, what a lot of teachers do, like the teachers did in the 1980s, is basically just socially promote the kids, fudge the grades, and let them go on to the next grade, even though they haven't mastered the material, and they continue to promote these kids, fudging the material, fudging the numbers, again, as related to them. And as those kids go on, this is where these kids basically wind up in a place where they really start struggling because all the issues they had early on were not dealt with in the elementary schools, and those issues further get compounded in the junior high schools. And as they are in these junior high schools or these middle schools, the environment gets just that much more toxic, because as the teachers look to give the kids more freedom when they definitely need more structure and more order, this creates a chaotic environment. And this chaotic environment, it's an environment where children who basically have learning issues are put in classrooms with kids who don't. And what happens with those kids who have learning issues, who have not mastered the material, is that they start to get frustrated. And as they start to get frustrated, what they do is disrupt the class with all sorts of antisocial behavior. And as they disrupt the class, it makes it where it's harder to learn the material and harder for everyone else to learn the material. And as these kids are in the class, again, they basically are frustrated because they don't understand anything. And as they don't understand anything, what they do is, again, act out in class. And that's where we start to see the problems, because as this disruptive kid is in the class wreaking havoc, it makes it just that much harder for the kids who are trying to learn concepts like fractions, concepts like integers, concepts like square roots, things that a child has to learn before they can even learn algebra. And as they, again, are in this junior high school, in this toxic environment, what happens is, as they're in this middle school, they don't get an understanding or mastery of the material. Or in some cases, like where I was, we weren't even taught the material. And then those kids are socially promoted on to high school. And as they're socially promoted on to high school, this is where the kids start to fall even further completely apart. And they fall completely apart because they don't have that base in integers. They don't have that base in square roots. They don't have that base in pre-algebra. They don't have that base in fractions. And that makes it just that much harder to teach them concepts like polynomials and other concepts that they need to learn. And as they're socially passed on from class to class, eventually they're passed on to sequential math. And sequential math, again, they can't do it because they don't know how to do the fractions. They don't know how to do the integers. They don't know how to do the pre-algebra. And as they go on into the classes, this is where they start to further have problems. And as they're socially promoted out of the high schools, this is where professors like Ms. Stankova have to try to deal with all of the issues of these children being 5 to 8 grades behind. And as these kids are 5 to 8 grades behind, they're expected to come into this college and do calculus work, even though these kids never were able to master math in junior high school. They were never able to master basic algebra in high school, or may be able to manage geometry or trigonometry. People are expecting them to graduate on to calculus, and it just shows the complete collapse of these public schools. Even after the No Child Left Behind law, we've had this complete collapse of the education system, and things, I would say, are progressively worse than they were when I was in school in the 1980s. Now, when I was in school in the 1980s, things were pretty bad as related to, again, math as related to kids, because, again, you had these junior high schools where these kids were basically, again, given no structure and given no direction, and these environments weren't safe at all. So it was just hard to learn in those environments. And as we went on, basically, again, we're in classes and trying to figure out stuff. When you got disruptive kids and you've got really bitter teachers, it's hard to learn the material you need to learn. And it just gets that much worse as you go on to out of junior high school into high school. A kid can just get completely overwhelmed, but we expect them to go to college. But the problem is that as we expect them to go to college, they're not prepared to be able to work on college level material. And all of that is basically due to the environment of public schools. The environment itself is a toxic one. Once these kids sometimes come out of elementary schools and they come into these junior high schools, This is where they stop being able to perform academically because the environment is so toxic, and people don't see the problems until these kids try to go to college. And a lot of kids, as they're looking to go to college, that's where we're starting to see these problems because the admission standards have been taken away. And as these admission standards have been taken away, this is where we're seeing all these kids who basically fell through the cracks as related to the middle schools and the high schools coming into the colleges, and just shows the sad state of affairs of our public schools as related to education. It just shows why American schools are basically last overall, because when it comes to education in this country, many people here in America don't take education seriously. No, we don't go out here and take education as seriously as they do in China, as they do in Korea, as they do in India. In those places, people take their education into their own hands. And as they take their education into their own hands, they're basically learning and mastering material at an earlier age. And that's all because the parents basically understand the value of education. But here in America, we don't value education. No, we go out here and participate in performative gestures. And as we participate in these performative gestures, we socially promote our kids. And as we socially promote our kids, what we do is we do them a disservice, where when they go into a college campus and professors are expecting them to have some sort of mastery of material from the past, they have to actually stop their class and look to go out here and use their office hours to try to get this child up to speed as related to teaching them topics that they should have known 5 to 8 years ago. That professor has to go out here and take time out of her schedule to then teach these children stuff that they should have learned years ago, should have learned this stuff years ago. But sadly, because of our dysfunctional school system, again, we think we can go out here and legislate kids to getting the education they're supposed to get with laws like No Child Left Behind, and even before that, concepts like social promotion, not understanding we do these kids a disservice. And this is one of the reasons why we have the population that has gotten progressively less literate than the previous generation. I mean, when it comes down to many of the Gen Z kids, they are actually, again, less literate than their millennial and Generation X and baby boomer predecessors. Many of those kids basically were failed by a school system filled with people who were more afraid of things like the No Child Left Behind law, and again, looking to finesse and fudge the numbers to pass them on, similar to the way kids were passed with social promotion. And as a result, we've got a population of people who are just dumber than the previous generation, because we didn't take the time to teach them. No, we didn't take the time to teach them, and we just passed these kids on, and due to us lowering the standards, we let them into the colleges, and now the colleges are having to go out here and try to deal with all the problems as related to the kids who basically were failed in the elementary, junior high school, and high schools overall, all because we made the promise of not leaving children behind, but left them completely behind as teachers fudged and finessed the numbers to give themselves a way to keep their jobs. Instead of looking to go out here and do what was best for the child, they just did what was best to keep their jobs. That's what happened with No Child Left Behind. Again, ironically, winding up leaving children behind, because when you have, again, students who struggling in a college as related to meeting academic standards, it just shows how we have a culture of dysfunction here in America. Again, when it's basically said that the average American these days can only read at a sixth grade level. And again, you have people with a 6th grade level going to college. You have people with a 6th grade reading level coming into academia, and we're wondering why these people are failing. And these people are failing because basically, as I really believe, many of the wealthy want it that way. They want a dumb population of people, not understanding that in their effort to control a dumb population, it devolves into stupidity, and it's really stupid to believe a person with a 6th grade reading level can go out here and compete in a college. It's really stupid to think that, but sadly, we have people here in America who can't see how all the dominoes fall as related to public education and can't see the damage that they do to their overall society, because not having a literate population just goes out here and creates a problem. When you have people who can't read, when you have people who can't read basic paragraphs being seniors in high school, it turns into people who basically go to college and fall completely apart. And again, you're just doing these kids a disservice. That's what we're doing to our kids. We're not investing in their education. And sadly, we don't have a culture of investing into people's education, because people are more invested in social currency and social media than they are their kids. To understand, you got to start with your kids at the beginning. You got to start with your kids at the beginning as related to their education, the way Asians, the way Indians do, the way many people from other countries do. They take their education in their own hands. They just don't expect the school to do everything. They go out here and, like my mother did, again, make it where we took our education in our own hands, because you can't trust the school system to get you prepared for college. No, you can't trust the public school system to get your kids ready for college. You've got to get your kids ready for college on your own. And when it comes down to many of us Americans, again, we have the worst school system because we have people who don't take education seriously. And these people, what really saddens me is that they're surprised that they get this result. But when it comes down to these same people, they don't want to do the work to improve anything. No, because they think if we keep the society filled with dumb people, we'll be able to control those people. But when you get a whole group of, again, people who are not well educated, you get chaos like we see in many of the junior high schools I attended, like IS 148. And these children of the corn, sadly, once they come out of these junior high schools, go on to become adults who create chaos. And that's all because they get frustrated because they don't know how to make the material in that classroom work. And as they don't know how to make that material in that classroom work, they don't know how to make life work. And that's what leads to these men and women in crisis basically going from being productive members of society to becoming part of the prison system. That's what makes these public schools a prison pipeline, because we don't really go out here and understand we need to focus on education early on, because a public school can be a pipeline to kids going to college, or it can be a pipeline to prison. And it's all based on how serious many of us take the material and how we take learning in this country. And when it comes down to people in America, we don't take education seriously. And that's why we have this sad state of affairs where we have basically kids who are 5 to 8 grades behind in a college, where they just aren't ready to be able to take on the lessons of academia in college and be able to do that kind of work. Now, if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct Imprint, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos talking about the sad state of affairs of public education, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Runway of Doom. The goddess next door struts her stuff on the catwalk to take on a runway of rogues in this action-packed all-new ISIS series adventure. Get your copy of ISIS Runway of Doom at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, An Offer He Can't Refuse. The man who rules the world gets a job offer he can't refuse in this action-packed all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' An Offer He Can't Refuse at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.